Hello, community leaders. It's an honor to be with you and all the leaders at every community location. Now, in a moment, we're going to look ahead. But let me start by just saying thank you. Thank you for an amazing 2017-18 ministry year. It was a year that included a lot of change. But at the same time, it was a year of advancing the Jesus mission. As we look over our shoulder the last several years, I think we were up in every category that we measure. Attendance, giving, 3C Christ followers, you name it. So I'll tell you what, here's what I want you to do. Turn to someone near you, give them a fist bump, give them a high five, and say, "Leader, you rock." Go ahead and do that right now. All right, very good. Now, the truth is, and this is by God's grace and His goodness, we've been a church that almost every year, I think every year but one for nearly 3 decades now, we've seen our numbers grow. If you look at the graphs, they're always kind of up and to the right, and we like that. But I'll tell you what, as I prayed and I thought about this next year and this next season, for me to challenge us simply to grow the Jesus mission through community, I think that challenge would be short-sighted. We are going to grow. We have a track record of doing that. Every year we do that. More people, more baptisms, more 3C Christ followers, and that's good. But as I look ahead at this new ministry year and this new season, I have a different vision for us that I believe God has given us. It includes growing community, but goes way, way beyond that. This past year, I had the privilege of publishing a book called Hero Maker. And it's a book for church leaders just like you. And in it, Hero Maker includes some research that we're able to do on churches across the United States. And the research discovered that every church in the U.S. can be grouped into 5 different levels. I think you'll find this interesting if you haven't heard it before. Level 1 churches are churches that are in decline, declining churches. That's level 1. Then level 2 churches are those churches that have plateaued. Added some folks, lost some folks. Some people joined the mission, some people left the mission. About the same. 80% of all churches fall in level 1, declining, and level 2, plateauing, right there. Then you have level 3 churches, growing churches. About 16% of all churches are growing churches. They have more people on mission this year than last year, a net gain. But then you have this special category of level 4 and then level 5 churches. Now, level 4 churches are reproducing churches. This may surprise you, but only 4% of all churches in the United States ever plant a brand new site or plant a brand new church, or level 4 churches. But then we get to these level 5 churches, multiplying churches. Multiplying churches are those churches that are constantly multiplying over and over again, movement-making churches. Now, let me explain why I think this is important to us and how I believe God is challenging us as a church. Now, to do that, I want to start with a question. And here's the question. Simple question, and you're going to have to answer it. What is our mission? Again, turn to someone near you and tell them real quick, what's the mission of community? What is the mission? All right, I hope you're able to say, helping people find their way back to God. Always has been, always will be. Now, here's what we're discovering about those churches that are multiplying churches, those level 5 churches. They are actually helping far more people find their way back to God than any other category of church. Why? Thank you for asking. 2 reasons. Let me give you 2 reasons. First, we know that new churches, on average, will help 4 to 5 times as many people find their way back to God than just an average church. New churches, again, help 4 to 5 times as many people find their way back to God on average as just a typical church. Now, if that's true, and we know it is true because it came from a study of more than 200,000 churches. If that's true, then it only makes sense that a level 5 multiplying church is going to help reach far more people because of all the new churches they're starting, find their way back to God than any other kind of church. So, take that, and then as I study the Jesus mission, I am just so convicted that these level 5 multiplying churches is exactly the kind of church that Jesus envisioned in Acts 1:8. He said this to his followers before he left. He said, you're going to receive power. The Holy Spirit's going to come on you. And when that happens, you're going to come together. You're going to be my witnesses. You're going to start right there in your hometown, Jerusalem. But it doesn't just stay there. It goes to Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. Now, and this is where I want to press in. I think we have a critical choice to make as a church. As a leadership, as a church, we have a choice. And here's the choice. Will we dare to become the kind of church that Jesus envisioned? See, I want us to be that Acts 1:8 church. I want us to be a church that, yes, we impact our Jerusalem, right there where you are, but also Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth. I want us to be that kind of church that Jesus envisioned. Why? So more people can find their way back to God. Let me tell you a story. I got an email last week from a young lady, Grace Copeland. And in the email, she described it this way. She didn't grow up going to church. She didn't grow up in a Christian home. In fact, the first time she ever came to a church was at a New Thing church. And New Thing's our church planting network, if you don't know. It was actually at Life Point Church in Raleigh, North Carolina. And it was a Sunday like we have coming up, like Show Up Sunday in the fall. And Donnie, the pastor, much like we challenged you, he asked everybody in their church to write down the names of 5 people that they would pray for and invite on that special day. Well, Grace's aunt wrote down her name and her mom's name, prayed about it, and then when given the opportunity, invited them to church. Well, on that Sunday that she came to church, they were starting a series, one that they did, called Finding Your Way Back to God. And it resonated with Grace, who was just in high school, connected with her. She actually went out and bought a copy of the book. She began her search. She went ahead and joined their student community, got in a small group, and over time she said yes to Jesus, and Grace was baptized. Not long after that, she started leading at Life Point. She got involved in Young Life at her school. And at the end of her email, she told me that this year she's going to New York City to work at the Dream Center, where they work with the marginalized, a lot of homeless people in financially challenged neighborhoods. And then after that, she's going to go to school and major in religious studies. And basically, she just wrote me to tell me her story of finding her way back to God and to say, thank you. All right, here's the point. If we don't start and multiply new churches like Life Point, then maybe Grace never finds her way back to God. Do you see why it's important to be this, what we call level 5, multiplying Acts 1:8 church? This spring, I had an experience that convinced me that I want to be that kind of a church. 10 years ago, we started a church in Kansas City. A whole bunch of people from community moved to Kansas City with some staff there. They started Restore Church. It was their 10-year anniversary, and they invited me to come back for their celebration. And being there in Kansas City, it was awesome. That church has now grown to about 900, 1,000 people. But in addition to that, they have helped plant 40 churches. If we didn't multiply that one church in Kansas City, think about this. Perhaps there are hundreds, and when you think about all the churches they planted, thousands of people that never would have found their way back to God. See, I want our church, I want all of our locations. Yes, I want us to reach our Jerusalems, our communities, and we're going to do that. We're going to keep doing that. We will do that. But I don't want us to just settle for focusing on our church. I want us to leverage everything we have to advance God's kingdom and become a multiplying church. To date, so you know, we've helped start what I would call 65 first-generation churches. Churches where we've given money or sent a church planter or sent people. I would love to put our sights on 200. How do we get to 200 first-generation churches planted? And when you think about that as a kind of a family tree, out of that, we've helped multiply more than what's now 1,500 churches that are part of New Thing. And if you do the math, think about this, 1,500 churches that we've helped. If they average 200 each, that's more than 300,000 people every week we're helping find their way back to God. And our New Thing team, we're praying and asking God, help us to get to 10,000 multiplying churches. I want more of that. And I think God wants us to lead that. And again, let me be clear. You know what? I want, and I'm using the blessed practices to help my family, friends, neighbors, coworkers find their way back to God at community, city, and suburbs. But I also want God to use us to reach our country and the world. All right, this is pretty big. So how do we do this? What will it take for us to become that kind of a church? Well, I think there's 3 things. And let me give these to you. 3 things. First, if we're going to multiply churches, we have to be a healthy church ourselves. We have to be healthy. So the first thing is healthy. It's like a woman who finds out she's expecting a child. One of the first things you'll notice when a woman finds out she's expecting it, anything she's doing, if it's smoking or drinking a little much, or she watches what she eats. Why? Because she knows her health will determine the health of the baby. And what we're talking about is having lots of babies. So if we're going to multiply, we need to be a healthy church. And that starts with being a 3C Christ follower. All right, a 3C Christ follower. The 3 C's, celebrate, connect, contribute, are the 3 primary relations we all need to grow in. It's how we here at Community describe a healthy, growing Christ follower. And you need to know that all of our locations led by our community pastors, have a key objective for this year of growing more and maturing 3C Christ followers. Now, here's what I need from you leaders, okay? Every one of you. First, I obviously need you to be a 3C Christ follower. I mean, speed of the leader, speed of the team. Leaders always go first, always. That's first of all. But then second of all, I need you to challenge every person in your group or team to also be a 3C Christ follower. You need, with your apprentice leader, to kind of go through the names in your groups or your teams and ask, okay, how do we encourage this person to take the next step from maybe 1C to 2C, from 2C to 3C Christ follower? So secondly, not only need to be healthy, but we also need to be a generous church. When a young family starts planning to have kids, they will adjust their budget. Well, in the same way, you need to know our church family has adjusted our budget so we can multiply. Why? So we can better accomplish our mission of helping people find their way back to God. Within each location's budget and within our church's budget, we have a multiplier fund where we give 10% to multiplying the mission. Now, that might be to help start a brand new location like Downers Grove, which is so awesome this last year. It might be to help start a brand new church like we're doing in Chicago right now. It might be to start a community freedom church like we're going to do in prisons. It might be a church in Nicaragua with Compassion, or a church in the Philippines with Frontline, or it might be to train a leadership resident to plant a church. But in order for us to be a generous church, again, we need generous people, and it always does, leadership's the key, starts with generous leaders. So here's what I need from you leaders, every one of you. I need you to set the pace. I need you to lead by example. I need you to be generous. I need you to take where you are right now and really say, am I just giving what I've always given, and I'm just kind of convenience and routine, or am I really growing in my generosity? And then I need you to encourage the people in your groups and your teams to have those conversations of, hey, we got to all grow if we're in our generosity, if we're going to accomplish the mission. Well, then lastly, for us to be this L5 church, a level 5 church, we need to multiply ourselves. I've had the privilege of working, probably not just hundreds, probably even thousands of churches. And my cumulative kind of observation is this: the churches that multiply macro, like multiply sites and churches and even networks like we're getting to do, the ones that help more people find their way back to God, they also multiply micro. I mean, they multiply apprentice leaders. They multiply artists, groups, teams. Now, every community pastor at every location, because we've talked about this, has one of their key objectives for this year to help you find an apprentice. And actually for them even to find someone who's a leadership resident at their location, a church planner in training. So here's what I need from you, leaders. I need you to pray, and I need you to ask someone to be your apprentice. You might be a kids theater leader, a Stuco leader, an adults leader, First Impressions, Arts Restore, but in every area, someone you're going to bring alongside you, and you're going to train them to move into your role. And here's why: because churches that multiply micro on the small level will eventually multiply macro, and that's what we want to become. Now, we don't just want to challenge you, we also want to equip you. So over the next year at your leadership community, we're going to equip you by actually taking you through big chunks of this book, Hero Maker. We had the privilege of bringing together thought leaders on 2 different occasions to take a look at these level 4, level 5, reproducing and multiplying churches and say, okay, what are the common practices of leaders that multiply churches, whether it's at a small level or at a higher level? What are the common practices? And we also began to study the life and leadership of Jesus and how did he catalyze this movement? And we narrowed it down to what we call the top 5 practices of leaders who multiply leaders. And what we're going to do is we're going to equip you with those practices throughout this next year at your leadership community. So I'm telling you, you do not want to miss a single leadership community. What your community pastor has planned is going to be outstanding. It'll be just great stuff for you in every way in your own leadership development. So let's quickly recap. What is the challenge? The challenge for us in this next season is for us to become what we're calling a level 5 multiplying church. Why this challenge? It fits our mission. This is the best way to help more people find their way back to God. Okay, how are we going to get it done? It starts, first of all, healthy. Healthy people, healthy leaders, healthy locations, and that means more and maturing 3C Christ followers. Generous. Generous people, generous leaders, generous locations who are constantly growing in our generosity. and then multiplying leaders, multiplying artists, multiplying church planters through apprenticeship. All right, leaders, before I wrap up, just ask yourself, are you a 3C Christ follower? You got to do that. Are the people in your groups and teams 3C Christ followers? You got to want that for them and lead them in that direction. Are you growing in your generosity? How about the people in your groups and teams? Are they also growing in their generosity? And do you have an apprentice? I'll tell you what, if you could say yes to all those things, you say yes to those things, we will become the church that Jesus envisioned.